Welcome, class, to Lesson 7-6, Day 1. Today, strong mathematicians can compare fractions with unlike denominators. You can take out your notebook, your pencil, you can write down today's date, the name of the lesson, and let's begin. So, box over notes, you see this before about numerators and denominators. The n is on top, the denominator is on the bottom, number of units, and how many parts make a whole. Another review. And now today, here's where you'll start writing these new ones down. There's three different strategies we're talking about on how to compare fractions. So you can compare two fractions with different denominators by writing equivalent fractions. That's a big thing. That's why we spend so much time finding equivalent fractions that use the same unit fraction. The fractions will have a common denominator. So our goal is going to have a common denominator, and they're going to be equal to find equivalent fractions. So with that, our first strategy is, 1, use the greater denominator as the common denominator. Notice we have 10 and we have 5. Well, we know that we can use 10 as our denominator because we know 5 times 2 equals 10. We know when we find equivalent fractions, if we do the one thing to the denominator, we do the same thing to the numerator, so that would be times 2. So really, 3/5 is the equivalent to 6/10. Now we can compare those. Now the denominators are the same, 10 and 10. 5 is less than 6, so 5/10 is less than 3/5. So that strategy works if you have a denominator that can be the common denominator, where you're only multiplying one set of fractions to find an equivalent fraction with the same denominator. So you can pause that down, write down that strategy. Strategy number 2 says you can use the product of the denominators as a common denominator. What does that mean? It means that if I look at this one, we have 5/8 and 4/5. Well, I know 5 cannot times anything to equal 8, and 8 can't times anything to equal 5, so I have to come up with a common denominator. So easy way of doing it is saying, hey, I know that if I take 8 times 5 and 5 times 8, since we know that multiplication, we can switch our numbers around and they're equal the same, both of those are going to equal 40. So then I would have 40 here, and I would have 40 right there. Now if I do the same thing to the denominator, I have to do the same thing to the numerator, and same thing to this numerator. So 4/5 equals 32/40, and 5/8 equals 25/40. So since my denominators are now the same, so check, check. 25 is less than 32, so 5/8 is less than 4/5. So you can pause down, write down that example as another strategy where we might have to multiply the denominators by the other denominator to find a common denominator. And last but not least, we can use a common denominator that is less than the product of the denominators. We can take 8 times 12 and we can do that, and that would give us some really big numbers. That'd be like 96. But we can think and slow down our thinking a moment and think, what do 8 and 12, can they multiply and have that same number together? Well, if I think about 8 and 12, the first number that comes to my mind is 24. Can I times both of those numbers by something to equal 24? The answer would be yes. So I can put 24, because that would be 8 times 3. And 12 times 2 equals 24. Now I do the same thing to the numerators. So 7 times 2 is 14. 5 times 3 is 15. Look at that. Look how close those are. So 5/8 is greater than 7/12 because when I found a common denominator, 15/24 is greater than 14/24. So sometimes you might not have to multiply them together. You can multiply them by different numbers, but as long as they have that same common denominator, you're able to compare them from there. So those are 3 strategies that can help you become successful when you're comparing fractions that do not have the same denominator. And right now, we're going to dive right in. It would be nice if we have a number line. We can use a number line as well as our new strategy. So if we look at where 6/10 are, we find 6/10. We can put a little dot right here. The other one is 3/5. We have a dot right here. Well, really, it looks like they're the same. Let's find if that's true. Well, 5 times 2 and 3 times 2 equals 6/10. So 6/10 is the same as 6/10. So those would actually be equal. Those would be equal. The next one, if we use the number line as well, we've got 7/10, and we got 4/5, so we know that they're not equal. So let's find out why they're not equal. Well, if we have 10 as our denominator, I know 5 can turn into 10 if we multiply it. So 5 times 2. If I do it for the denominator, I have to do the same thing for the numerator. And now I get 8 tenths. Oh, so 7 tenths is going to be less than 8 tenths or 4/5 because 4/5 is equivalent to 8 tenths. You can pause this down right now and write down these two examples to help you out. And now we've taken away all of our helps. We're going to use those strategies that we learned about at the beginning of the lesson. Can we find things that have the common denominators? So the first one, we got 12 and 6. So I think to myself, can 6 become 12? The answer is yes. Yes, it can, which means I only have to find equivalent fractions for this side because 6 times 2 equals 12, and that side's already 12. If I times my denominator by 2, I have to do the same thing to my numerator, which would then give me 10 twelfths. Well, if I have 10 twelfths and 10 twelfths, those would be equal. So 10 twelfths is the equivalent to 5/6. Let's go to the next one, 12 and 5. Well, I know 5 can't become a 12, so I'm going to have to find, is there anything closer between those two? Nothing that's popping out to my head really right away, so I'm just going to go with our approach of we're going to times this by 5, and we're going to times this one by 12, which means we're going to times both sides by the same number as we did their denominator. And now I get over here 35 60ths, and here I get 36 60ths. Whew. 1/60th. That's a small amount. So we know that when we look at these, we can look really closely. 7 twelfths is less than 3/5. Barely, but still less than. Our next one, we have 8 tenths and 3/4. Can we think of a number that they might have close? Well, 10, 20. Ooh, 20. I know 4 can get to 20. So let's find one that's not all the way besides multiplying 4 times 10. We're going to actually multiply it by 2 this time. And we're going to multiply this side by 5. Why am I doing that? Because 2 times 10 equals 20. And 4 times 5 equals 20 as well. That's the common denominator. Now I can do the same thing on the top. 2 times 8 is 16. 3 times 5 is 15. Once again, a really close one, but it looks like 8 tenths is going to be greater than 3/4. If you want to right now, since you're getting the feel for this, you can pause the video, try this one out before I do it, and see if your work matches my work. And here we go. So 5 and 6, I don't see one that I can't make 5 into a 6, so therefore they have to go, I'm thinking, I'm just going to go 5 times 6 on this side, and I'm going to go times 5 on that side, which now gives me 25/30. Hopefully you got 25/30. And on this side, you got 12/30. And now I know 12 is less than 25, so 2/5 is less than 5/6. So you can pause the recording right now, write down these great examples to help you out, and notice how sometimes we had to change one number, sometimes we had to multiply the denominators by each other, sometimes we found a step along the way, so you didn't have to multiply them by each other. All 3 strategies we used in our examples. And now it's your turn. So you draw a big line on your paper, right? Box 3, now your turn. And obviously I want you to compare these numbers and to show me your work. Showing your work is just like what we did on those last slides. This right here is showing your work. I see what you did to find a common denominator, and then I can see the 2 common denominators and how you compared them. So with these problems right here, pause the video and show me your work and solve them. Good luck. And on our next page, we have a slew of comparison problems. So I want to say the same thing. Start with the main problem written down. Show me your equivalent fractions. Show me the common denominators. And then tell me which one is greater. So now you can pause the video, take care of all 6 of these problems, and look forward to seeing all of your work. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to write them down or share them out. If you have any strategies that you use to help you, make sure you include those as well. And once again, thanks for a great lesson.